Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate that you watched this movie, 8½. Fellini's 8½, considered one of the top 10 movies of all time on many, many lists. Some of you may be surprised by that, but we'll talk about that too. So let's see. To start off, the film on IMDb, which is a pretty tough aggregator of critics and not generally not kind to most movies. Anything that gets over a 6 is considered quite good. It has an 8 out of a 10. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 98% from the critics, and the consensus was it's, quote, inventive, thought-provoking, and funny. 8½, represents the arguable peak of Federico Fellini's many towering feats of cinema. I'm going to get into a little bit of the history of Fellini and his films, but I wanted to kind of give a little bit of an overview of some of his other films, so you have a sense of where this is. There have been lists of the top, 100 films. Oh, someone's waiting. Top 100 films of all time, and depending on the list you see, Fellini will have 3 or 4 in the top 100. Which for any one director, I think is pretty remarkable, because, Hitchcock has in the teens, depending on the list, but nobody else has much more than 2 or 3, and he has either 3 or 4, and that's about as good as it gets. So according to most rankings, his best film is 8½, which is this one. Number 2 is La Dolce Vita. Number 3 is, that's where it starts getting subjective more, La Strada or Amarcord, The Knights of Cabiria, I Vitelloni, and Juliet of the Spirits. Somewhere in there, those are all mixed in. And they're very, very different styles. Juliet of the Spirits was his first film in color, and he went super indulgent in colors, like a crazy painter experimenting with paint. Every scene was bright with conflicting colors and just dazzled your eyes. This was his last black and white movie, which I think is also kind of significant because it marked a change. But you have to understand, he started out as what was called a neo-realist. He worked with Roberto Rossellini, and he started out as a writer for him, and then he was a co-director, and then he started directing. And when he would do the neo-realism, I think his best films were like La Strada or I Vitelloni. La Strada, I don't know if you ever saw it or heard of it. It has Anthony, Anthony Quinn as a big circus muscle man, and the woman who played his possibly partially retarded assistant, lover, friend, and caretaker was Fellini's wife, Giulietta Messina. And she was also the star of Juliet of the Spirits and Knights of Cabiria, where she played a prostitute. And I think this is significant because he cast his wife as a prostitute. He's a different kind of a character, so you have to go with that. And then you see, because this film is very clearly very autobiographical, there's a lot going on in here as far as his history and how he changes it, adjusts it, shows fantasy about it. But some interesting things I found. Fellini is Martin Scorsese's favorite director and David Lynch's favorite director. So again, you've got, 2 very, very different types of filmmakers. And this is one of their favorite films. This is also one of Fellini's favorite films, which I think is kind of interesting. But something I saw here, and this was from, there's all different websites where I got this information, but on the list of the greatest directors, he came in 9th in the 25 most influential directors of all time. In international directors, he was number 5 or 3, depending on what you look at. So definitely highly regarded. And this is, again, supposed to be his best film. In Studio Binder, they said, to describe outside the post-neo-realism movement, there is no Italian cinema without Federico Fellini. To describe his work, the first adjective that comes to mind is magical. Not like rabbit out of a hat magic. It's more a feeling you get after watching a movie like Juliet of the Spirits or La Strada, and can't help but feel there's more to life than we can see. La Dolce Vita is a celebration of adulthood. I Vitelloni is a celebration of youth. And 8.5 is a celebration of the creative process, even when it tears the artist apart. One thing I wanted to mention about this film, I didn't want to forget it, is that, oh, I have to find that line. His co-writer on this was Tullio Pinelli. And there's an interesting story I'll get to as how they met, because they both were reading a newspaper or a magazine at the same newsstand. They were reading the opposite side of it at the newsstand. And that's how they met. So let me see if I have that, because I know it's in here somewhere. And and Fellini talked about how the two of them met. Yes, here it is. Okay. So it says Tullio Pinelli met Fellini in a Rome kiosk in 1946 while they were reading opposite pages of the same newspaper. And Pinelli said, meeting each other was a creative lightning bolt. We spoke the same language from the start. We were fantasizing about a screenplay that would be the exact opposite of what was fashionable then. The story of a very shy and modest office worker who discovered he can fly, so he flaps his arms and escapes out of the window. It certainly wasn't Italian neorealism, but the idea never went anywhere either, which not true if you saw the very beginning of this film. That's really what they used. Because that was basically the opening where he gets out of the car and kind of flies through. Okay, now, and I mentioned Tullio Pinelli was significant because the 4 films he worked on with Fellini, 8.5, La Dolce Vita, La Strada, and I Vitelloni, 4 of his best 5 movies. So I think that's pretty significant. So I wanted to make sure to mention him because I think he deserves a lot of credit. Now, way back, this movie, it won the award for Best Foreign Language Film and Best Costume Design. It was nominated for Best Film Director and a few other awards as well. And it came about from a 1960 letter that Fellini's colleague Brunello Rondi first outlined his film. Fellini wrote to Rondi about a man suffering from a creative block. He said, well, the guy, any kind of a professional man, a theatrical producer, has to interrupt the usual rhythm of his life for 2 weeks because of a not too serious disease. It's a warning bell. Something is blocking up his system. Unclear about the script, its title, and his protagonist's profession, he scouted locations throughout Italy, quote, looking for the film, unquote, in the hope of resolving his confusion. His friend suggested the title be The Beautiful Confusion as the film's title. Under pressure from the producers, Fellini finally settled on 8.5, a self-referential title referring principally but not exclusively to the number of films he had directed up to that time. And then, of course, this one being the half because he was stuck on it. Given the order to finally start producing it in the spring of 1962, he signed deals with his producer, Rizzoli, set dates, had sets constructed. He cast Marcello Mastroianni, although it wasn't confirmed, but there was word he was looking originally at casting Laurence Olivier in the part of Guido, which I thought was also kind of interesting. But he cast Mastroianni, Anouk Aimee as his wife Luisa, Sandra Milo as his mistress, and he did screen tests in Rome. He hired the cinematographer, who obviously deserves a lot of credit, Gianni Di Venanzo, and he couldn't decide what the character did for a living, though. The crisis came to a head in April when, sitting in his office, he began a letter to Rizzoli confessing he had, quote, lost his film, unquote, and had to abandon the project. Interrupted by the chief machinist requesting he celebrate the launch of 8.5, Fellini put aside the letter and went on to the set. Raising a toast to the crew, he felt overwhelmed by shame. I was in a no-exit situation. I was a director who wanted to make a film he no longer remembered. And lo and behold, at that very moment, everything fell into place. I got straight to the heart of the film. I would narrate everything that had been happening to me. I would make a film telling the story of a director who no longer knows what film he wanted to make. Anyone have any thoughts at this point you want to share? There's more, I got plenty more I can go on, but I'm happy to open the floor. Anyone wants to unmute yourself and comment? Not yet? Okay, I'll continue. All right. So let's see. When shooting began, someone I never heard of in 1962 recalled taking a little piece of brown. Oh, Fellini took a little piece of brown paper tape and stuck it near the viewfinder of the camera. Written on it was, "Remember that this film is a comedy." So he wanted the cameraman and himself to remember that the film was meant to be a comedy. Perplexed by the seemingly chaotic, incessant improvisation on the set, the American press officer at the time, Dina Boyer, asked for a rationale. Fellini told her he hoped to convey that 3 levels on, quote, "on which our minds live: the past, the present, and the conditional, the realm of fantasy." As with most Italian films of the period, the sound was entirely dubbed in afterwards. It's pretty easy to tell that they did that. That was a technique that Fellini actually liked. He had total control of it. So if there's, waves in the background, he can add them later and put the sound levels where he wanted it. Because they did a lot of scenes at the beach. Many lines of the dialogue were actually written during post-production while the actors on the set mouthed random lines. 8.5 marked the first time that Claudia Cardinal was allowed to dub her own dialogue. Previously, her voice was thought to be too throaty, coupled with her Tunisian accent, and was considered undesirable. He shot the end of the film initially as written. Guido and his wife sit together in the restaurant car of a train bound for Rome. Lost in thought, Guido looks up to see all the characters of his film smiling ambiguously at him as the train enters a tunnel. He then shot an alternate ending around the spaceship on the beach at dusk, but with the intention of using the scenes as a trailer for promotional purposes. In the documentary Fellini, I'm a Born Liar, Tullio Pinelli, the screenwriter I mentioned, explained how he wanted Fellini to abandon the train sequence with its implicit theme of suicide for an upbeat ending. Fellini accepted the advice, using the beach sequence as a more harmonious and exuberant finale. So if you were watching it thinking, when the fantasy sequence where the director Guido goes under the table and with the gun and kills himself, that was like the ending of the movie, that may have been the original ending of the movie, but apparently Tullio Pinelli talked him out of it. Also, if you notice, there was a scene with the music where it was the theme song from The Godfather. Did anyone notice that? And The Godfather wasn't made until over a decade later. You didn't notice that? Okay, so it was seen in a restaurant, and you hear the music, da 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 da. So it was the theme from The Godfather. Nino Rota, who did the music for this film, composed the film music for The Godfather, but he used that sequence in this film first, and it became very famous as the theme from The Godfather. Now, when the film was originally released, there were most critics really loved it, but not all. Pauline Kael, who was also very wrong about 2001: A Space Odyssey, she hated that. She didn't like this. Newsweek defended the film as beyond a doubt a work of art of the first magnitude. The New York Times, Bosley Crowther, the critic from way back then, praised it as a piece of entertainment that will really make you sit up straight and think, a movie endowed with the challenge of a fascinating intellectual game. If Mr. Fellini has not produced another masterpiece, another all-powerful exposure of Italy's ironic sweet life, remember he made this right after La Dolce Vita, he has made a stimulating contemplation of what might be called, with equal irony, a sweet guy. Fellini's biographer noted that in the months following the release, critical commentary on 8.5 became an intellectual cud to chew on. The philosopher and social critic Dwight MacDonald insisted it was the most brilliant, varied, and entertaining movie since Citizen Kane. In 1987, so about 20 or so years after the film was made, a group of 30 European intellectuals and filmmakers voted 8.5 the most important European film ever made. Roger Ebert wrote that in 1993, despite the efforts of several other filmmakers to make their own versions of the same story, it remains the definitive film about director's block. He also put it on his great movies list, and he said it's the best film ever made about filmmaking, and he also had Fellini as his favorite director. Although he acknowledges, he wasn't perfect. None of them were perfect. All right, any comments to this point? Usually there's Anne and Fred, and they would say something, but they're not here. Anyone have any comments? Oh, there you are. Hi, Anne. Hi, there you are. I didn't see you guys. Okay, hi. Sorry about that.
So based on a tremendous response, when you first opened it up for discussion. Fellini was a big success in that he left us all, we're 8.5, it's like in a state of confusion, you know?
Speechless, right?
Nobody knows what's going on, and we're still not sure. However, it's a wonderful not sure. That's all I can say.
Well, actually, you hit on something. I mean, I think I actually have it right here. This is great. So there were a couple lines that I just loved in the film. Louisa says to him, "Lying is like breathing to you." But I want to get to your point, which comes up shortly. Okay. All right. So do you remember the critic Daumier, the guy who was always giving him his harshest objective criticism? And he was saying it like he was saying the weather, but it was like really heavy criticism of Guido. I don't know if you remember his character Daumier, the guy with the glasses, bald guy. So he said to him, he quotes Stendhal at the point around where the film was about to be scrapped. He goes, "The solitary ego that revolves around itself and feeds upon itself ends up strangled by a great cry or a great laugh." And he says to him, "What monstrous presumption to think the squalid catalog of your mistakes, the tattered pieces of your life, the faces of those you could never love, could be your movie." And if you remember the scene where they were doing the casting and looking at the film clips of the casting, they were in the theater, when Daumier says one of these types of criticisms to him, Guido goes like this. And there's a scene where, a fantasy scene, where Daumier is promptly hanged right in the theater. I don't know, do you remember that scene? Okay, they put the black cloth over him and hang him. But after the film was canceled, Daumier tries to cheer up Guido, and he says, "If we can't have everything, nothingness is true perfection." I'd like to cheer him up, right? So now getting back to your point, Mike, when the film was canceled and Daumier joked that the producers are supposed to lose money, Guido was happy and relieved, and he says, "He is still confused, but the confusion is me." He accepts it, and he's no longer afraid to tell the truth, and he says, "The truth as I am and not as I'd like it to be." In that sense, that makes it sort of a happy ending. He had an epiphany that he could live with himself, with his flaws. Louisa, maybe she couldn't, but at least he could live with himself at that point. So it didn't end with the suicide fantasy scene at the press conference on the set. And then the clown parade, which you see him actually directing the little clown parade at the end, has his little self in it, and that's what the spotlight ends, a little baby spotlight on little Guido, and it fades out, and that's the end of the movie. So just some other notes. Anyone else want to say anything yet at this point? Raise a hand, feel free. Yes, Mike or Ms.
Can I just ask, who played the part of Guido's mother?
Ooh, okay, that's a good one. Let me see if I have that. Carla Rosali. I'm looking at I have like 12 people in the cast. No, I don't think so. I'm sorry.
So that's not Fellini's wife. I thought it might have been.
No, Juliana Messina wasn't in this movie. No.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, but if you remember the harem sequence, which was sort of a bit of a reconstruction of his little childhood sequence where they did the wine thing and then he had the bath and then they wrapped.
Right.
Okay, so in that harem sequence, the woman who was acting like his mother was Louisa, his wife.
Oh.
You didn't notice that?
No, I didn't
He
realize.
didn't have the glasses on, but yeah.
Okay.
So it goes on to he like I said, there's a lot going on in this film. So now I'm not sure if I can do a screen share here. This will be interesting to see if I can do this. Let me try it. Hopefully it's here. Oh, here we go. Maybe this works. I'm going to try this and see if it works. Maybe it's working. Okay, great. If you can see this picture, does that come out okay? I can't hear you, but if you can see it, hopefully that's good. All right, good. So this is the scene at the beginning. And I wanted to show you this because it's just a fascinating scene. I mean, nobody opens a movie this way. This was when he was in the car in the traffic jam looking around. These are the people looking at him. And And then you just see all the arms. You don't see the heads. You just see the arms, their bodies. And then you see this dance sequence, which is the older man with Barbara Steele, the actress Barbara Steele. And I swear, and I know he would admit it, Quentin Tarantino stole his famous dance scene in Pulp Fiction from this scene here. And then another one I wanted to show you. Where was that other? Oh, maybe I don't have that picture here. Okay, nope. All right.
And the other thing, that car, the people are looking out the back window of the car. It almost looks like they're, driving, but the car is facing backwards in that particular scene.
There's so much going on there. It's incredible. And let me show you. I did have a couple other pictures I can show you, but they're not up there. So I got them here. One sec. Okay.
And which role did Barbara Steele play?
Sorry, Barbara, what?
Which role did Barbara Steele play?
Carla Morin,
okay, with the
the
hat.
student who had the
fur.
thesis. Wait a minute. And her thesis was, where is it? Her thesis was funny. It was the solitude of man in contemporary theater. Kind of a little joke on Guido.
I'm making sure to hold the top.
All right, so this picture, hopefully you can see this. Let's see. Can you see this picture?
We can.
Okay. What does this face look like to you?
The devil.
The devil.
Right. You see the way that, if I can point there. Yeah. The way the hairstyle is done to make it look like the devil's horns.
Horns.
Right.
Yes.
Horns.
Do you remember
Yeah.
this character, who he was in the film? Do you remember him?
No.
He was the devil.
Small part. But he was the guy ushering Guido to meet the cardinal
Oh, right.
in the scene in the spa bath. And I looked at it and I had to freeze the frame and take the picture, because this is what Fellini does. He puts so much in there. This is the guy taking Guido to meet the cardinal.
Wow, that's interesting.
So there's so much packed into this movie.
He looks like
The way his hairline is.
Yeah, you see it? It's pretty clear.
Hairline, it looks like the devil's horns.
Right, exactly.
And
Exactly.
even like the chin, the way the
Yep.
beard makes the
Right.
chin pointed like the devil.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot going on with, and there's so much with color, even though, I mean, not color, it's because it's black and white, but the use of the shadows and the polka dots and the spinning umbrellas, the way he did everything. And
This is all within the community?
okay, and then there was another.
There's another one. He points to his nose, and he's talking about Pinocchio, another Italian gentleman.
Yes, that's right.
It's
Yes, very good point. Okay, wait, here we go. Let me see, I had some notes on this. Where did I put that?
By the way, the Italian is spoken so beautifully. I used to really speak Italian, but you can understand so much of it, which a lot of movies in Italian you cannot understand like that.
Well,
It
you
is
know
so
why, right?
clear. They speak beautifully.
That's because they all dubbed it in a recording studio afterwards. It wasn't done on the set with background noise. So that's why it was very clear.
Wow,
Yeah, he liked doing it that way. Shoot, there was something.
incredible.
The cardinal, the meeting with the cardinal was, there was something that the cardinal said so do you remember that he asked the cardinal, when he gets to meet the cardinal, he says, "I'm not happy." Do you remember the cardinal's response? The cardinal says to him, "Who told you you're supposed to be happy?" I thought that was great. He's going for enlightenment and he's like, "Who do you think you are?" Essentially, come on. Okay. All right, so there's a couple other critical notes I thought that were kind of interesting. Let's see. All right, this was in Movie Makers, a book, Movie Makers, by Ian Freer. Federico Fellini, the circus ringmaster of Italian movies, was a giant of world cinema. His deeply autobiographical work brought the European art film onto the world stage, winning the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film 4 times. His work, informed as it was by his love of comic books, theater, especially circus, women, and food, progressively grew away from realism and storytelling into imaginative flights of fantasy. And this film's right at that point where he started going into more fantasy. And his films are sensual and luxurious, reveling in astonishing sights and intoxicating sounds. So well defined and coherent was his worldview that his surname has become an adjective, Fellini-esque, being a watchword for absurd, decadent extravagance. Okay. So, oh yeah, that was the picture I wanted to show you. Where was it? Here? This was it. This was
When
it.
he's
Okay.
at the spa, his life was in such chaos, and these
Right,
people
he
are
was
just
having a breakdown.
calmly walking around with the parasols.
Yep. The contrast. He always does the contrast.
Yeah,
Like this one. I love this picture.
yeah,
Can you see this one?
yeah. I'm wondering what if the footprints on the beach depict something in particular, like nothing is left to chance.
Well,
know?
there could be a few things. It could be the person who's flying the kite was walking there. The kite being, of course, Guido. I just love this shot. This was also towards the beginning of the
It
movie,
was crazy.
right? So yeah, he thinks in ways just other people just never thought. I mean, and the film starts silent. And I was trying to think, I don't think he did that first with that silent opening, because I think Ingmar Bergman did it in Wild Strawberries too. But that's okay. And that may have been, he may have done that in the late 50s. But it catches your attention. And he's in the traffic jam, and then he's huffing and puffing and kicking and trying to get out of the car, and he can't. And then he flies through. And of course, Fellini always does the Christ-like symbolism. So you see him, with his arms out, flying out. So there's that comes across many times. And then he does things with smoke. If you saw the steam and the smoke, and not only in the baths, but a lot in the baths, but in other areas too. There's the scenes with the smoke, like from the train. So the train has the smoke, and he thinks that his mistress didn't come, and he's like, oh, just as well.
Happy.
He's starting to turn away, and then the smoke clears, and there she is. And he's like, huh, okay, she's here. Not happy, not sad, just, huh, okay. That was the face. So, and then of course he has to deal with that, and he has to deal with inviting his wife to the same place where his mistress is, to make things further complicated. And the doctors told him he should be getting rest, which he does none of that. He also, if you notice, he never answers a question, almost never. He keeps getting asked, oh, so what about this? And what about this? And he defers, he turns away, he literally sneaks away in a couple of cases, because he doesn't know, he can't deal with it. And that's why he's going through the stress with the medical incident,
What was the symbolism of all of the people walking down that set that he was building down the stairs? Who were all those people, and what was that all about?
That was all his history of his past. It was all the people in his life.
And
it
they
was
were
just
all
a
walking
parade.
down
It
the
was
stairs.
essentially a parade. Remember, the circus is huge with him. He was a little kid, and that was his big escape, was going to the circus. So that was a huge thing for him. And in almost every film, he's got something to do with circus characters or the circus. Or if you remember, we can go back to when we talked about Cuckoo's Nest, the casting of some of the people in the insane asylum, the looks on their faces, the structure of their faces, how unique and fascinating they were, and odd and different, intentional.
Right. Mhm.
That's Fellini's casting. He casts faces for certain looks, like the Saragina, who was the prostitute by the beach when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Huge in his mind, huge woman, overly large in everything, her hair, her girth.
Right.
Everything.
And she was a mess too.
Yes, of course.
Well, the hair was a mess.
Right.
Well, no, it was like her makeup was a mess, her hair was a
Yep.
mess.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he's done that a lot. And then he even played with that when he has his mistress come to bed, and he wants her to look more slutty. He takes the makeup
Right.
line. He wants to
Right.
make her look more slutty. Because
Makes
it's probably
eyebrows.
going back to his past as a kid with Saragina overdoing everything.
Yeah. And what about the prostitute that kept saying, I'm only 26? And he said, you have to go upstairs.
She
What
was
was
the
the
dancer.
symbolism of that?
Upstairs are the older people. They're
Right,
over 30.
upstairs with the old,
That's
and
over 30.
Well,
Right,
actually,
and
over
she was
25, I
trying
think,
to-
if she said
You
she was
get-
26. may have
she
been
was
lying.
trying
Maybe
to
she was
pass
30.
herself off as younger, and she clearly
Right.
wasn't.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, so because that was the world he was creating where he could dictate where the women in his life go.
oh, he was like compartmentalizing that. He was
Right.
putting them in different,
Like the older ones, they go up here. The younger ones I still want to play with, they stay down here.
interesting.
And then when things get a little crazy for him, where they start confronting him, all the women in his harem start giving him a hard time, like, hey, you're unfair. This isn't good. And he starts looking around like, uh-oh, this is not going as well as I hoped it would in my fantasy. He takes out a whip and becomes,
Oh, right,
the master
to control them.
to control them. Exactly.
But
Right.
from the
That's how he was having
circus,
fun.
but the whip from the circus.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. From the circus also, right?
No, but I
Yeah.
could see how the circus,
Yeah.
the whip would come in.
Right, yeah. And the other part that was kind of interesting, there was a funny line. If you remember the character of Maurice, who looked like a circus clown, but he was the one who had the scene with the mind reader, the woman mind reader, the telepath.
Uh-huh.
So Maurice was the one who would go, he'd hold his hand over someone's head and then she would say what they were thinking. Okay.
Right.
So Maurice, where was I going with that? I wanted to say something about Maurice. Okay, so he was a clown, but he really isn't a clown. But sometimes clowns are good, sometimes they're bad. I mean, you look at Stephen King, what he does with clowns. So Maurice was sort of a guide for Guido's character. He would lead him to different things. He would lead him away from things that he didn't want to be at too, which he did. But there was a funny scene where Maurice goes over to where there was one older man with his mistress, and he goes over to the mistress to read her mind, and she's like, no, and she said something like,
Sure.
she made some comment. She didn't want people reading her mind because she was afraid of what they think, and her lover, the older man, laughs and goes, don't worry, nothing, they won't find anything there, there's nothing, oh, don't worry, there's nothing to see there.
Coming out.
You don't have to worry about it. So he definitely was trying to have a sense of humor with it.
It was interesting. I had seen this movie when it first came out. I
Oh.
could not remember what it was about. The only two things that stuck out for me were Seragina and the ending. It's
And
like,
the ending,
yes, I recognize that. The rest of it was like brand new again.
Not the beginning? The beginning? No?
Not even the beginning. No, just Seragina and the ending stuck out.
All right. Well, yeah, there's a lot of memorable scenes in it. This is a picture of Fellini on the set of, I don't know if it was this film or not, but one of them. So you can see.
It's at the end.
All right, let's see if I had any other notes. Got that one already. for you.
Marcello Mastroianni is much handsomer.
Right. Yeah, it would have been interesting if Olivier played him, right?
That's unbelievable. How could he speak Italian?
It didn't matter. They all dubbed it.
It was
later.
all, it was
Oh,
dubbed.
It was dubbed,
Oh.
so it wouldn't have mattered. I don't know if Barbara Steele spoke Italian. She was in the movie, and
I wondered. But
Okay.
that outfit that woman's wearing is absolutely outrageous with the veil and the hat,
Yes,
Right.
the plush or plush, right?
the poosh.
Right.
Mhm.
That's
What
And
was
his
the meaning
wife
of
was the
Anna
complete opposite.
Nisi?
Sorry.
What was the meaning of the Anna Nisi slogan
Oh,
that
I'm glad you asked
Maurice,
that.
Oh,
I have
that
it.
Maurice
was-
did, and then he saw it from
was
an
the-
earlier segment of his
it-
life?
It was the magic words that the friend said to him when
Yes,
he
but
was
there's
young.
a lot
and
more
now
to
the
it than that.
magician
Hang on,
said
I gotta find it. I'm
Thank
glad you
you.
mentioned that because I have to find it.
Nimi, Essie or something.
No, I got it. I just got to find where I wrote it, where I have it on the
I
page.
wrote it too.
Anna Nisi Masa, I think it was.
Tammy.
Where is he, Doc?
We'll find it before the end.
I know. I have to find it. I have to find it. Boy.
Let me see something.
All right, I can give you a couple of.
I got it.
You got
Asa Nishimasa.
Right.
What does that mean?
It doesn't really mean anything, but
Well,
it's
it
the
does.
words that they said
Let's
as
see if
magic.
let's see if I could find it.
Oh, like, yeah, like abracadabra.
It was the magic word.
Yeah, it was the girl said it to him when his, which actually they said in what I read was his cousin. Let me see if I could find it. Oh, maybe I could do a search. I'll find it. All right, hang on. I might have it here. Oh, this might be it. Yes, I found it. All right, let me just open it. Okay, great. I'm so glad you mentioned it. Here it is. Asa Nishimasa. During Guido's first childhood sequence in the big farmhouse, his female cousin reminds him of a magic spell, Asa Nishimasa. She tells him it has the ability to make the eyes in a portrait point to a secret treasure. The cryptic phrase makes such an impression on Guido that nearly 40 years later, it is psychically available to a pair of magicians who read that successfully from his mind. Fellini ostensibly uses the phrase to establish a connection between Guido's past and present, yet it has more significance than a mere bridge between scenes. It's actually really only one word encoded in a children's play language similar to Pig Latin. When the second syllable of each word is removed, what is left is the word anima. Fellini, who was interested in the work of Carl Jung, would have known that Jung used the word anima to describe the personification of repressed female characteristics in the male. Asa Nishimasa can be interpreted as a reference to Guido's confusion about women. In the magnificent harem scene, Guido has the ability to control his many women with a few fierce cracks of his whip. Yet in reality, he is not so powerful. The harem fantasy itself is in fact inspired by a humiliating moment during which Rosella and Luisa's sister Rosella, expressed their disgust of Guido's affair with Carla. Though Guido enjoys creating the harem fantasy and adores sleeping with Carla, his voracious sexual appetite is a serious problem for him, making his relationship with his wife and his religious impulses painfully tenuous. It may be natural for a man to have some attraction to any woman he meets, but Guido is an extreme case because he wants, even expects, to have them all. This attitude is parallel to Guido's creative demeanor. Just as he doesn't want to commit uniquely to Luisa, he cannot choose a single theme for his film. This irresolution was also a problem for Fellini himself, who made 8.5 describe a director's indecision because he himself couldn't commit to a single, more coherent theme. And again, the original title for the movie was The Beautiful Confusion. So there you go. So I'm glad you asked about that because I did check it.
So Ed, I have a
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Ed,
David.
can you walk through your thought process in choosing this film for discussion? This is a difficult film to access and to relax. Like an Italian film, like Life is Beautiful for this audience, Holocaust, kid and father, something different. This is a really difficult movie.
But you need to see the movie more than one time.
I was going to
Because
say
the
that.
reality,
Right.
between the reality and the dream sequences, and when it's fantasy, you need to go through it several times just so you can separate it all. Very difficult to separate it.
It's hard. It is hard to sort it out. And just one showing, it's like kind of
Gotta see it more.
throws you away and you don't know what you've seen.
So what was your thinking?
So my thinking, all right,
It's a
there's a
top
lot
film.
to it. There's a lot to it. When I was in college studying film, Citizen Kane was the movie that got me interested in film, as that was the first one. And I was 12 or 13 and saw Citizen Kane. It's like, wow, this is phenomenal. When I went to college and had one of my majors as film, I took a course on Fellini. So, I was fascinated by films before that, and I had seen one or two of his movies before, but taking a course and seeing, and he's got a list of, pretty long list of films that he's made. I saw almost all of them, at least once, and several more than once. And I was trying to think, we haven't had a foreign film, and I wanted to have something that was a bit challenging from the standpoint of visually, artistically, creatively, and something that was highly regarded internationally. And again, because we hadn't had a foreign film, I wanted to pick a good one. So this was something I was familiar with because I'd seen it several times, and I thought it would be a stretch for everybody.
Eye-opening.
Creative stretch for you to all see. And if you weren't familiar with it, I thought it was good to be exposed to it because I think he's a genius.
Absolutely.
And then
It would have helped if we had this discussion before we saw the movie.
It certainly was.
okay. Well, again, you can always see it again. That's I think the beauty of it. And it really it bears watching more than once because there is so much in it. I watched just now. I mean, I watched the opening 2 or 3 times and I watched the ending twice. You know, and I saw the film 2 different times, one 3 weeks ago and one a couple of nights ago. So I was still going, oh my gosh, I missed this part the first time. So
I have one problem with the beginning when it starts in silence, and I'm taking it on my phone and casting it up to my screen, and I'm getting silence. I'm figuring
you thought there was a problem with the
something is
volume.
not working. So that was a tough start.
right.
Well, the first time I watched it, I was so confused and so upset with it that I said, I got to watch it a second time. And the second time was very different. It started to make sense to me. But the first time, I hated it. But after,
I understand
afterward,
that. The first time,
then I
didn't
started
hate it.
to
I was
really-
just overwhelmed, and I was thinking I was so mad at myself. It's like I know I missed a ton of stuff. I got to see it again. That was it. Because
I
he
think
packed
this-
it. So
the more you see that, the better it is.
right. Yeah.
I guess so, but I think it was a hard movie to watch and really, because I mean, it's a film class, but we're not in college. So the thing is, to me, it's something that should be enjoyable, that we can have a really good discussion. And I mean, I know Ben and I couldn't watch it. It just was, it was too out there. And, you know, maybe in the 60s, there was a lot, I mean, you know, a lot of movies start without sound. Now that's a big deal. Well, not a big deal, but that happens a lot now. And I think that maybe he was ahead of, you know, of his time with all, you know, everything that he puts into flying out of the car. And, you know, some of the photography I thought we did watch some of it, was pretty cool. But it was like, to me, it was, I was watching someone have a meltdown. And like, so, you know, who cares? Is there more to this than just your story? That's
why you had to see it 3 times.
no,
Twice
thank
wasn't
you. No,
enough.
thank you.
But I'll tell you something, it's quite thrilling to see. It is a famous movie.
I know it's famous. No,
And
I
it
listen, I
was
get it.
exciting, as upset as I was the first time watching it, and I was upset. I went back and watched it again and it started to get clearer to me, but I was having a terrible time the first time.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Well, it's not
does
an easy
challenge you.
film.
It challenges you. It makes you think visually what he's doing.
Exactly,
audio-wise,
this
dialogue.
is true. And the story and how his dreams and, you know, I guess it was just that when you're watching a film, even though this is not something I would have picked, I couldn't really even appreciate it. I think that's the word. I just couldn't appreciate it. I couldn't appreciate the, you know, his
Now-
work at this.
Becca, me too.
juncture.
This
You
is
know,
Cindy, me too. I tried 2 times. Steve watched it and I left. I couldn't do it. I don't
mean,
watch enough
yeah.
movies to like spend my
Hard
time
work.
trying to figure it
I
out.
thought it was like
Such
so
hard
artsy fartsy that I'm, you know, I'm not. I
Yeah,
didn't-
Rebecca.
Yeah, but Rebecca, you only saw 4 1/4. You didn't see
Okay,
8
no,
and a half.
no, Ben said how
Two and a
much?
half. That's
Ben
right.
said 2.5.
Rebecca, you're
I'm
on
doing an
season-
8.
on season
I'm
6.
doing an 8.
There was 9, there was 7.
Oh,
First
wait.
of all, you need
There's a
to
rebellion going
separate
on here.
reality from fantasy. So that's first of all.
says? Who
And then
says,
the
Elizabeth?
dream
Who
part,
says?
you
We
have
all
to
have to
separate
look
all
at
those sections.
Moral of the story is we need a vote. We need to have a vote.
I loved it
Very
even
weird.
though the first time I hated it. I loved it. Now, if I see it again, I'll start to
Oh,
understand
my
it
God.
more.
Well, Elizabeth,
That's
To
why
you're,
it was
Ed's
exciting.
point, if I may, to Ed's point, the bulk of us chose that guy that was dead that wasn't dead.
Dick
Oh,
Johnson.
Dick Johnson is dead. Who voted for that?
The dead guy.
Well, I'm
No,
voting
no,
you
get
off
over it
this,
already.
this
Get over
board.
All right, hold on a sec. All right, I'm gonna mute everyone for a sec. I wanna go over something. I wanted to make sure you understood this also, that, did anyone see Woody Allen's Stardust Memories? Show of hands. Where do you think he got the idea? This movie. That's totally where it came from. Stardust Memories totally came from this. Did you see 9, either on Broadway or the movie 9? It was from this movie. There's many other adaptations of this movie. Yeah, on Broadway, it was with Tommy Tune. He directed it with Raul Julia, Anita Morris. Let's see, Karen Akers. A Broadway revival in 2003 with Antonio Banderas, Jane Krakowski, Mary Stuart Masterson, and Chita Rivera. And in 2009, a film with Daniel Day-Lewis as Guido, Nicole Kidman, Judi Dench, Kate Hudson, Penelope Cruz, and Sophia Loren. So it's, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot to commend the film. It was the New York Film Critics Circle winner and also National Board of Review Award for Best Foreign Film.
What's
So
the meaning of 8.5?
He was stuck making his 9th movie. That's where it came from. He sort of made 6.5 to 7 because he did, there were a few anthology films where there were like 3 different movies and he directed one of the sequences. But anyway, just when the math came through, he said his director pushed him and they were going to call it The Beautiful Confusion. And finally he goes, okay, 8.5. And that was it. So. All right, so I think I covered pretty much all I wanted to. I could read you some reviews on what some of the critics interpreted, but we don't have to. I just thought it was there was a lot there, and we haven't had a foreign movie yet. Yes, Elizabeth.
The other thing, if you noticed all the eye makeup, that was the eye makeup that was popular at that time. Sophia Loren and all the Italians had that slanty eyes coming out, which then disappeared. But it was interesting to see all the actresses.
Okay, I have Roger Ebert. Okay, I can give you a part of his review. If I see where it starts, here it is. At the time. What we think of as Fellini-esque comes to full flower in La Dolce Vita and 8.5.
Yeah, how dark we are.
His later films, except for Amarcord, are not as good, and some are positively bad. It's true. But they are stamped with an unmistakable maker's mark. The earlier films, wonderful as they often are, have their Fellini-esque charm weighted down by leftover obligations to neo-realism. Let's see. Okay, in the Boston Review, critic Alan Stone deplored Fellini's stylistic tendency to emphasize images over ideas. Ebert says, I celebrate it. A filmmaker who prefers ideas to images will never advance above the second rank because he is fighting the nature of his art. The printed word is ideal for ideas. Film is made for images, and images are best when they are free to evoke many associations and are not linked to narrowly defined purposes. Here is Stone on the complexity of 8.5. Almost no one knew for sure what they had seen after one viewing. True enough, but true of all great films, while you know for sure what you've seen after one viewing of a shallow one. Now, someone mentioned before, Roberto Benigni's Life is Beautiful. I wish I could find the quote here, because one critic said, people now think of Italian movies as Life is Beautiful. And the critic was deploring how, not deploring the movie, but deploring its simple, straightforward story structure, and saying he longed for the times of Fellini's films that were more complex and rich and intelligent as far as what the thought process and the creative input. So just, again, different points of view. So let's see, is this where Ebert's review is? Oh, wait, I wanted to get, yeah, this is Ebert's film. Okay, so he says, yeah, this is interesting if you want to hear a little bit more about the details of the camera. Fellini's camera is endlessly delighting. His actors often seem to be dancing rather than simply walking. I visited the set of his Fellini Satyricon, a so-so movie. Some really good parts and some really not good parts. Was interested to see that he played music during every scene. And remember, again, they're not recording the dialogue on the set. So he was playing music. The music brought a lift and subtle rhythm to the actors' movements. Of course, many scenes have music built into them. In 8.5, orchestras, dance, bands, and strolling musicians are seen, and the actors move in a subtly choreographed way as if they're synchronized. And again, he gives credit to Nino Rota, who did the score.
Yes.
Few directors make better use of space. One of his favorite techniques is to focus on a moving group in the background and track with them past foreground faces that slide in and out of frame. He also likes to establish a scene with a master shot, which then becomes a close-up when a character stands up in frame to greet us. Another technique is to follow his characters as they walk, photographing them in 3/4 profile as they turn back toward the camera. And the picture I showed you of the devil guy, that was him turning back toward the camera.
Right.
And he likes to begin dance sequences with one partner smiling invitingly toward the camera before the other partner joins in the dance. Again, stolen by Quentin Tarantino in Pulp Fiction. All of these moves are brought together in his characteristic parades. Inspired by a childhood love of the circus, Fellini used parades in all his films, not structured parades, but informal ones, people moving together toward a common goal or to the same music, some in the foreground, some farther away. 8.5 ends with a parade that has deliberate circus overtones, with a parade of musicians, major characters, and he calls them the grotesques, eccentrics, and types that Fellini loved to cast in his films. I have seen 8.5 over and over again, and my appreciation only deepens. It does what is almost impossible. Fellini is a magician who discusses, reveals, explains, and deconstructs his tricks while still fooling us with them. He claims he doesn't know what he wants or how to achieve it, and the film proves he knows exactly and rejoices in his knowledge. And I have a quote from Fellini at the end. If I can get to page 21.
Fellini decide on the music that was put in there, like the ride of
No,
the
he uses
Valkyries?
Nino Rota. Nino Rota did all that.
So he didn't do the Wagner part.
Oh, he may, yeah. The other parts that weren't composed specifically for the film, yes, I'm sure he did. Like Kubrick chooses his own music. Where is that page? I want to get that
And
page.
I have to get off because I have another Zoom at 8, but thank you so much.
Okay,
That
thank
helped
you.
me a lot.
Oh, I got the quote.
Appreciate it.
All right, hang on one sec. All right, this is Fellini. It's absolutely impossible to improvise. Making a movie is a mathematical operation. It's like sending a missile to the moon. It isn't improvised. It's too defined to be called improvisational, too mechanical. Art is a scientific operation. So I can say that what we usually call improvisation is, in my case, just having an ear and eye for things that sometimes occur during the time we are making the picture. Now remember, the biography of him was called Fellini, I Am the Liar. Cinema is an old whore, like circus and variety, who knows how to give many kinds of pleasure. Besides, you can't teach old fleas new dogs. That's Fellini. If you thought his films were confusing, try understanding that too. So that's
Thank
pretty
you so
much it. That's what I had
Thank
for you.
We're going to go
Thank
listen
you,
to
Ed.
Biden. Biden is speaking at 8 o'clock.
That's right.
Us
Okay.
Canadians are into it.
All right.
Good.
Okay, so next time, if everyone put their info in the chat, you can vote for the next picture. So please put your emails in there if you haven't already.
Will you give us a choice?
What?
Will you give us a choice?
We
Oh,
always
yeah,
get a
we'll do the
choice.
choices. We'll do it like previously. Yep.
Okay.
So you guys
Always
will
get
get
a
to choose.
choice.
Thank you.
All right.
Good meeting.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.